Hello there, a very good evening to you. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive here at the Sky News Centre. It's time to see what's making the headlines. Tonight we have Nancy Fielder, the editor-in-chief at the National World Cities newspaper group. We're also joined by Lucy Fisher, Whitehall Editor at the Financial Times. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Back to you in just a few minutes. Let's firstly start off by having a look at what's on the front pages of tomorrow's papers. And as the eve of the coronation approaches, the Metro pictures the Prince and Princess of Wales drinking pints in a pub with the headline, "Send him Hictorious." The Telegraph focuses on the coronation anthem composed by Andrew Lloyd Webber, which he says he hopes will be sung in churches across the land. The Mail, meanwhile, leads with what it calls growing anger over the attendance at the ceremony of China's vice president. On the day, oil company Shell announced record profits of £32 billion. The newspaper reports that it force-fitted 4,000 of those controversial prepayment meters in less well-off households in the same period. The possible dangers of artificial intelligence lead The Guardian tomorrow morning with fresh warnings from technology watchdogs here and in the United States about its continued development. The Financial Times leads with the latest interest rate rise by the European Central Bank and a warning from its president that the fight against inflation isn't over yet. And a quick reminder, of course, for you that by scanning the QR code that you're going to see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch with us. Well, let's talk now to our paper previewers. We're joined tonight, of course, by Nancy Fielder and Lucy Fisher. Thank you so much for staying up way past your bedtime to talk to us this evening. Let's start with the front page of the FT. Voters vexed by photo IDs. Of course, today it has been the local elections, the first elections in this country where it has been mandatory to bring some form of ID. And certainly from reading the newspaper reports, it seems like it's been mixed success. Nancy, to you first, what do you make of how the FT have covered it and the story in general?
I think the FT's got it spot on with this one. Everything we're hearing from readers and everybody we speak to, all the comments we get online, is that nobody is really quite sure why you need to bring photo ID. At this point, it didn't seem like, of all the big electronic scams going on, this doesn't seem like it was one of them. Turnout we know is going to be really low. People's morale is rock bottom with our politicians, and this is just another step that's putting people off voting. And sadly, I think it will have an impact. We haven't had many stories of people who've actually been turned away, because I think the message did get across fairly well, fairly loud and clear. But it's just another hurdle that's been put in the way of a country that's really fed up with its politicians anyway.
I suppose, Lucy, we have to have ID on many other forms of our life, don't we, in day-to-day life? So what difference does it make when we have to go and vote?
Well, I think that is the argument that's been mounted by ministers who also point out it is the norm at polling stations across much of Europe and other democracies as well. I think the criticism perhaps has been about the speed at which this has been brought in and the list of ID documents that have been accepted. There's 22 forms of ID that have been eligible to show at polling stations today, ranging from passport to driving licence to biometric immigration documentation. But there's also been criticism that a wider array of travel passes eligible for older citizens have been accepted, whereas similar travel passes for younger people haven't been on that list. I have been noted and been concerned that the Electoral Reform Society, which has been against this change today, has said that there have been examples both of people turning up at polling stations with the wrong type of ID, but also people turning up with photo identification and being told by returning officers and officials in polling stations that they don't look enough like the photo in their ID and therefore, again, not being able to vote.
Yeah, OK, let's move on and have a look at the newspaper. Shell making a £32 billion profit, eye-watering to say the least, particularly in the current climate. And there's a catch as well, isn't there, Nancy? How do you read this? What does it say?
I mean, yeah, this is a great front page. On the day that Shell announces that it's made billions, here are all these people who were forced to have prepay meters put into their homes because they basically couldn't be trusted to pay their bills. Now, the reason for that is because they didn't have enough money. The great irony with the prepay meters is all of a sudden the very poorest people in our country were forced to pay premium rates because of the meters, and they had no choice. And for Shell to be doing that while they are literally making billions in profits, I mean, this is the whole heat or eat debate. People were having to make that choice in really, really cold periods where they were worried about feeding their families. Food banks have absolutely soared in the last few years. I mean, it's disgusting. And Shell, the big oil companies just rake it in. They don't seem to care. Nothing seems to bother them. The government doesn't seem to take much action on it. And I think you just got to feel for the people who were sort of forced into this. And it doesn't really feel like a massive amount has changed. The gap's just growing, isn't it, between those who have and those who have not.
Back to the front page of the newspaper, talking about their big story being Shell making billions of pounds of profit, I should say. But they're going with the line that they have force-fitted 4,000 prepayment meters in the UK while making this amount of profit. I mean, they say that the installations are a last resort and its UK division is loss-making. What do you make of that line?
Well, that's obviously Shell's defence of these figures, but also a very striking comparison that the newspaper has brought out, saying that the record profits that Shell has made, £32 billion, has meant that it has been able to pay out to its shareholders more money than the entire sum that the UK Treasury has raked in so far from its windfall tax on oil and gas. So I think we're only going to see renewed pressure now from opposition parties on the government to extend that windfall tax to try and reap in more of these sort of extraordinary profits that fossil fuel companies are making in order to try and bring down the price of energy for consumers.
Will that happen, do you think, Nancy? There is a windfall tax in place already. Do you think the government will expand it? It's definitely something that Labour would want to do, isn't it?
It may depend on what happens in the early hours of today and when the results come back in tomorrow. I mean, the Conservative government don't seem very keen on it. They throw every excuse they can as to why they shouldn't tax these multi-billion pound profit organisations more. But I think your average person on the street thinks that you should pay more, that everybody has to pay. You pay depending on how much you earn. So surely that could be extended, and particularly when you're looking at the great irony in this story and how people at the very bottom are the ones who have been punished more. I think it could well become a big election debate, but we will see after the election that we've just finished today.
Let's get back to the Financial Times and talk about another business-related programme, that story, I should say, that regarding inflation. We had the European Central Bank, didn't we, raising interest rates and also warning that the fight against inflation isn't over. So a stark warning for all of us that, you know, the cost of living crisis isn't going away anytime soon, is it, Lucy?
No, that's right. And the ECB raising the benchmark rate by 25 basis points today. It is a slower rate than they have raised the benchmark rate in the past. And they note that there are, fears of a credit crunch and that borrowing has reached borrowings in a restrictive territory now, which are the factors that have influenced this slight slowdown in the rate going up. But they warned that this isn't the last we're likely to see of rises this year. They expect the benchmark rate to reach 3.75% in July. Of course, this comes after the US Federal Reserve also raised rates earlier this week. So yes, inflation is remaining stubbornly high across both sides of the Atlantic, and central banks are struggling to do what they can to try and curb it.
And just reading a little bit further into the article, Nancy, it says that the US Federal Reserve, of course, that's the US's central bank, signalled this week that its latest quarter-point rate rise could be its last. So maybe a bit of a silver lining. And I wonder what that will mean maybe for our central bank, the Bank of England, and whether we think that interest rates in this country have kind of levelled off. What do you think? What do your readers think?
And I mean, the interest rate that we're talking about, the rise, is actually smaller than many had feared it would be. So, I mean, all the signs are there that it is easing off, but I think that the problem is it's a long way from being over, isn't it? And I think people have kind of survived winter. They've got through the enormous bills. They may not have all arrived yet, the enormous bills, but I think it's kind of, you feel that there might be a bit of a relief coming. But yeah, actually, when you speak to people, they are still really worried about paying for their mortgages. There's lots of people whose mortgages haven't changed because they're on deals yet. And when that comes, they're absolutely terrified what's going to happen. So even if it slows down or even if it stays where it is, it's still a nightmare situation for your average ordinary family.
Let's have a look at some of the other stories that you've chosen for us to have a look at now, starting with the front page of the Daily Mail. They're looking ahead, of course, to the coronation on Saturday and the guest list. And they're saying mounting excitement ahead of the coronation last night has been overshadowed by a furious row about China's involvement in the historic occasion. Tell us more, Lucy.
Well, this is the news that instead of the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, accepting the invitation to the coronation, he is sending the vice president, Han Zheng. Now, this is the Chinese politician who has overseen the brutal crackdown on liberties in Hong Kong, which has been a key source of geopolitical tensions between the UK and China. It's led to a Home Office scheme allowing certain citizens of Hong Kong who held passports or British overseas nationality to come and live in the UK. And so it seems a slightly odd choice. It's certainly being interpreted as a snub by the likes of Chris Patten, Lord Patten, the UK's last governor of Hong Kong, who says that the decision to send Han Zheng shows that China doesn't give, as he describes it, two hoots about the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you make of this then, Nancy, in terms of, I mean, I suppose would you expect the president of China to come, or do you, I mean, or not? The vice president, some people would say, is more than enough.
I think it depends where you sit in how much you think this coronation is a massive thing and how important the British royal family is these days. I mean, I don't think it shows that they don't give two hoots. I think it shows that they're actually playing quite a game and they're using the coronation as a political tool, is what it looks like to a lot of people. I mean, the Mail says it's sort of overshadowing things. It may be in sort of certain political arenas. I think for your average person who's planning on enjoying the street parties, I don't think it's a big thing at all. But it clearly is sending a message. This is not an accidental thing, is it? They've picked who they're sending, and it's somebody that they know will deliberately cause a stir. So it will be interesting to hear the conversations that perhaps won't be held in public.
And certainly doesn't help the relations, does it, right now, between China and the UK? OK, let's have a look at what else is in the papers. The Guardian's front page, warning again of the dangers of AI. This is as the news broke yesterday that one of the seniors of Google has quit, saying that development of AI has just gone too far. What's the Guardian's take this time? Nancy, let's come back to you first.
So this is the fact that the British watchdog and also in America, they are kind of stepping up now and saying, actually, we're finding a bit of a warning blow here that we are watching AI. There may well be tight regulations, and actually the industry should get itself in order and make sure that everything is safe, that they're not spreading misinformation when it comes to journalism being done by AI, that cars are safe and we're not killing people when it comes to cars being driven by AI. So it just covers so many different aspects of all our lives. And although some of the big ones are coming to the front now, actually AI has been in the background for a very, very long time. So it is about time we got a little bit of control on this. I'm not quite sure we're going to get control over it, but we do need regulations in place, and we do need to know that these things aren't being rolled out so quickly that it can take over and create havoc, which some of them have the possibility of doing. They're so massive and they spread so quickly.
OK, Lucy, just quickly give us your opinion on this before I ask you, we move on to another paper. I mean, do you share those concerns that Nancy has?
Yeah, look, I think Nancy makes a good point. At the moment, the expertise behind the coding to make these models, these so-called foundational tools of AI, are located within companies, private corporations, and also the enormous amount of computing power that's needed to power these models, again, is held in the hands of private companies. So I think given that there are such huge consequences for society when it comes to all sorts of fields, whether it's disinformation and what people can believe as deep fakes become ever more lifelike, as chatbots like ChatGPT become ever more sophisticated, and indeed the impact on jobs. There's now a lot of concern about how many sectors are going to be completely disrupted by AI being able to do the jobs that are currently performed by humans. I think there does need to be a much more grip taken by governments and regulation begin to be thought about in a much more more serious and comprehensive way.
OK, Nancy and Lucy, we'll be looking at more papers, including the front page of the Metro, Send Him Victorious. It's a fantastic headliner in the next hour. For now, though, thank you very much. Of course, Nancy and Lucy